Imagine waking up one morning and no longer needing anyone's permission to exist, no approval to chase, no performance to maintain, no audience to please before you allow yourself to feel worthy. Now ask yourself honestly, how long has it been since you felt that way? How many mornings have you spent quietly editing yourself before anyone else even walked into the room? Most people believe self-belief looks like confidence, a straighter spine, a louder voice, a face that never flinches. But that is not belief. That is theater. Real self-belief is quieter and far more unsettling, because the instant you actually trust yourself, you stop asking the world for permission. And that, without you ever raising your voice, makes certain people deeply uncomfortable. Carl Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. What he left unsaid is that this becoming almost always starts in isolation. Nothing dramatic happens at first. You simply start noticing. The way some people only feel warm toward you when you are unsure of yourself. The way your laughter gets called arrogance the moment you stop apologizing for taking up space. The way certain friendships grow tense the instant you stop shrinking to keep them comfortable. And slowly, an uncomfortable truth rises to the surface. Some people never loved you. They loved your doubt. Because a person who doubts himself is predictable, safe, easy to hold, a river does not ask the canyon for permission to carve its path. It simply moves, patiently, persistently, and in time, the stone has no choice but to yield. Self-belief works the same way. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps flowing until what once contained you can no longer hold its shape. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, in the quiet of his own notebook, that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within, in the way one thinks, not in what others permit, not in what others approve. Picture the friend who once called your calm wisdom, but now calls it distance, simply because you stopped explaining your every decision to her. Not a villain, just someone who confuses your certainty for a wall. Not applause, but recognition. Not motivation, but awareness. That is where change begins. There is a version of you built entirely for survival. The agreeable tone, the constant justifying, the nervous laugh before a hard truth, the apology offered before a single word is spoken. None of it was accidental. Somewhere, in a smaller and more frightened version of yourself, a rule was learned. Being fully yourself might cost you love. So the mind builds a mask. Jung named it the persona, the face we wear to move safely through the world. Useful until the day we forget it was ever a mask at all. Fire does not perform for anyone. It does not dim itself so the room feels comfortable. It simply burns at the temperature it was always meant to burn at, and anything unwilling to withstand that heat was never meant to stay close. You are allowed the same honesty. A person can survive rejection. Few people survive years of self-betrayal without going numb, and numbness does not look violent. It looks like staying in a job that empties you, a relationship where your spirit dims a little more each year, a version of peace that costs you everything except your actual peace. Kindness without limits does not earn respect. It quietly teaches people how far they can go. At first they call you patient, understanding, easy. But beneath the good manners, people test limits, not out of malice, simply because that is what unguarded ground invites. Give endlessly, and slowly you stop being seen as a person with boundaries. You start being treated as furniture, reliable, available, and never quite considered. Viktor Frankl, who watched every external freedom stripped away from him, insisted that the last of the human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any set of circumstances. Not the applause of others, not their comfort. The choice, always, stays yours. Think of the co-worker everyone praised for being so easygoing, right up until the day she finally said no, and the room called her cold instead of honest. Not because you got worse, because you stopped performing the version of yourself that made everyone else's life easier. The strange thing about real self-belief is that it rarely feels like strength in the beginning. it feels like loneliness. The moment you stop needing constant validation, the temperature of your relationships shifts. Some people who once seemed close grow distant the second you stop asking for their approval. It confuses you until a pattern becomes visible. Some people were only ever comfortable around the uncertain version of you. A mirror does not flatter. It does not soften what stands in front of it. It simply reflects, without apology, and some people cannot bear what they see once you stop distorting yourself to make their reflection kinder. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events themselves, but from the judgments we attach to them. The distance some people put between you and them, once you stop performing, was never really about you. It was about what your clarity made them see in themselves. Self-belief creates a kind of independence that cannot be moved by guilt or shame or the quiet threat of rejection. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you actually are, is one of the most painful processes a human being can go through, because you are not simply discovering yourself. You are grieving every identity you once needed to be loved: the obedient child, the endlessly agreeable friend, the version of you engineered to avoid conflict at any cost. Each one protected you once. Eventually, protection turns into a cage. Not comfort, but honesty. Not smallness, but truth. That is the trade every real transformation asks you to make. You begin noticing things you cannot unnotice. How often criticism is envy wearing a disguise. How many unwritten rules exist only to keep people obedient. How many voices call growth arrogance, simply because your growth reminds them of the growth they never allowed themselves. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and much of what keeps people small is not the world's punishment, but the punishment they imagine before anyone has said a word. A tree does not stop growing because a smaller tree nearby feels overshadowed. It grows toward whatever light is available, because that is the only obligation it holds toward itself. Consider the parent who quietly discourages a child's ambition, not out of cruelty, but because that ambition reflects a dream they buried decades ago. They do not mean harm. They are only protecting the fragile peace they made with their own unlived life. Jung believed the heaviest burden a child carries is the unlived life of the parent. Caution passed down as wisdom. Fear passed down as realism. Don't stand out too much. Be reasonable. Stay where it's safe. And slowly, without cruelty, without violence, a spirit learns to make itself smaller than it was ever meant to be. But survival without meaning eventually starves something inside a person. Some grow anxious, some grow numb, some grow endlessly busy, because stillness would force them to face what they have been avoiding. Beneath every version of this is the same quiet wound. They never fully became themselves. People can sense it when someone has stopped living as themselves. There is a heaviness to them, a quiet resentment toward anyone still walking freely. Not hatred, recognition. Your freedom becomes a mirror they didn't ask to look into. Not the loudest person in the room carries the most power. It is the one who no longer needs the room's approval to know their own worth. So maybe self-belief was never about becoming louder than everyone around you. Maybe it was only ever about refusing to abandon yourself in silence one more time. Not performance, but presence. Not permission, but peace. This has been Stoic Journal. If tonight's reflection found you at the right moment, the next one is already waiting, because the work of becoming yourself is never really finished, only continued.